Hello, I'm Ajahn Sona. Welcome to Birken Forest Monastery's live stream, questions and answers. Feel free to post a question in the question bar if you wish, and we may or may not be able to answer it. Sometimes we answer questions from previous weeks that were neglected, so don't be disappointed if you hear questions that are not in the question bar but are being asked. So I would like to make a little announcement about the next 3 weeks as well. And the Q&A, the regular Q&A, will not be held in the next 3 weeks, but instead there will be other videos. There will be continuation of the talks on the 37 requisites of enlightenment, and there'll be a couple of other videos which you can look at and be surprised. And they will be at this on Sunday. They will be released on Sundays. And then by the 4th week, we will be back with the Q&A. This is because we need a technical staff to do this, and technical staff sometimes have to go away and deal with the world, and then they come back and we start again. So let's start with the first question, Pia.
Our first question today is from the question bar from Charlie in the Czech Republic. Dear Ajahn, I play with the idea of ordaining, but I don't feel quite up for the challenge of living in a community yet. Due to a mild form of Asperger syndrome, I am somewhat shy and socially awkward. Would this be a big hindrance?
Well, I seem to know of several monks that have perhaps are mildly on that spectrum, and they seem to do fine. It's not really shyness that is a problem or any of these things. People's minds work in different ways, and it may be a strength in certain ways. So yeah, don't presume that it would exclude you. What you want to do is find a good community and then go spend time there, just feeling what it's like to be in a monastery. Most of our branch monasteries, well, I guess all of our branch monasteries and associated monasteries, and they're around the Western world. You're in Europe, are you? Where is he at?
Czech Republic.
Czech Republic, yeah. Yeah, we have some Ajahn Chah branch monasteries in Europe. Anyway, you would go and become what's called an anagarika for a while, and that would just be a layperson who stays at the monastery on 8 precepts and gets to know what it's like. And that could last up to a year before you're even considered for novice ordination. And then if the community thinks you're ready and you want to, then you would become a novice. And then you might spend another year as a novice. And then if the community thinks that you're ready, including the senior monk who is going to be your teacher and you would take dependence on for the next 5 years, they have to all agree, and you have to, of course, want to do it. And so you have plenty of time to assess the situation, and this is why we do that. It is possible to take very quick ordination, go through both the novice and full ordination status. In some of the Asian countries, you just show up and the next day you're in the robes. But this is usually a cultural thing. You want to do it, that you know what you're into, and that the community knows all about you and can assess you, because over a period of a year, the people who you're working closely with, being close to, will get to know your characteristics, and they'll evaluate you. Right, so let's go on to the next question, Pia.
Next question is from the live stream from the One. There is a state called the cessation of perception of feelings that is associated with abiding in Nibbana, according to Abhidhamma. However, there is also another state called the Arahant phala, where an Arahant can directly abide in Nibbana. Are these concepts supported in the suttas, and how do they differ from one another?
Yeah, so the first one is perception, cessation of perception and feeling, not perception of feeling. And the second condition is Arahant phala. That's a Pali term, P-H-A-L-A. Phala means the fruition of the attainment of the fourth stage of enlightenment. They are abiding in that. And yeah, it's Nibbana with the khandhas remaining. So these are, the cessation of perception and feeling is talked about in the suttas, and it's only available to, I believe, the anagami, the third stage and fourth stage of enlightenment. It's a kind of samadhi type of experience, which can only be attained after a great deal of purification of what are called the fetters, the samyojanas. And so the first 5 fetters would have to have been broken, abolished. And then the last 5 of the 10 fetters are very subtle. And so if one has broken these first 5 fetters, then one is called a non-returner and or an arahant. And so these 2 stages of enlightenment, the third and fourth stages, apparently can attain the cessation of perception and feeling, but not necessarily do they do that. For the arahant, the experience of arahant phala, the fruit of the experience of arahantship, should be attainable definitely should be an experience that they can have, because of the experience, the fruition of their attainment. Is it equivalent to Nibbana? Well, yes, the Nibbana that occurs while one is alive, but it's not necessarily just, you can't perhaps equate that with what happens at the death of an Arahant, the Nibbana. But that's a topic for another time. Yes.
Next question is from Anonymous in Tamarack, Florida, United States. An American author's gravestone reads, "Here lies one doubly blessed. She was happy and she knew it." What does the Buddha say about knowing one's happiness, knowing one's goodness? In Western culture, it seems desirable to have this ability, but also may be smug. I think it would be lovely to know one's goodness. Can you please provide Buddha's guidance, Ajahn Sona?
Yeah, it's not. It depends on the type of happiness that they're talking about. So if you just happen to be fortunate for a little while, your health is good and you inherited some money or something, that type of happiness, you shouldn't be just smug about that situation, because that's very precarious. Anything can happen, and eventually it will. You will die, you will age, you will perhaps experience illness, and you will lose everything. At least at death, you will lose everything. So the temporary types of happiness, the smaller types of happiness, are nothing to write home about, because they're not bad. The Buddha doesn't think that being happy in a temporal way is a bad thing, but just the roots of suffering are intrinsic into temporary states of happiness, because everything changes, and eventually the situation itself will crumble away. So it depends on what kind of happiness this person had and whether they were aware of it. I think that particular phrase is from maybe Mark Twain or some literature where he went through various types of people that are not happy, and then there's those who are happy, and then there's those who are happy and know why they're happy. So that the last category is the best, is that not only are you happy, but you know why you are happy. So that would reveal some insight into things. As to being smug, I mean, Buddhism celebrates happiness. And there are all kinds of sort of latter-day European existential things that are very suspicious about people who are happy and all this kind of stuff. And there's kind of an exaltation of suffering as well. There's a whole strain of that in Christianity. Buddhism is based around the essential truth of suffering. There is suffering, but it's not like we want to just exalt the suffering or indulge in the suffering, or that somehow that it elevates you to suffer. We're actually interested in finding out why we suffer and getting over the suffering, rather than exalting in it. So we do celebrate those who have freed themselves from the intrinsic suffering nature of the essential suffering is psychological. And it's not a matter of just being healthy or being fortunate in your health and not suffering bodily, but the psychological disposition which has enough insight and wisdom to overcome the psychological dimension of suffering. But that's to be highly exalted and celebrated, and without any feeling of self-consciousness about that. Yeah, one should wish to be happy. There's all kinds of sophisticated language, pseudo-sophisticated language in certain philosophical circles that are very dubious about this idea of a happy person and so forth. But Buddhism is quite aims for that unshakable kind of well-being and happiness. Yeah. Okay, next question, Pia.
Next question from the live stream is from Indra. Do you think the experience of Nibbana leads everyone to the same conclusions as the Buddha, or do you think people with differing intelligence and cultural background would describe it differently, like neoplatonist as the one or ultimate reality in Hinduism?
Neoplatonic oneness, and then the sort of Mahatma in the great self in Hinduism and so forth. These are very different than the Buddhist ideas. It's not unity with the one. It is the experience of none. It is to free oneself from the idea of a fixed self, naive ideas of self. But it's not necessarily to achieve some sort of unity with an oversoul or with God. There is no mention of sort of an ultimate deity in Buddhism. Heavens and deities and so forth are well known in Buddhism. And they are not thought to have reached the final conclusions. There is quite a bit of discussion with Brahmins and the Vedic teachings and so forth by the Buddha, and he is not persuaded in any way by them. He critiques them in a lot of ways. I think the Advaita Vedanta schools have inherited some ideas from Buddhism. Actually, they recognize the problematic nature of so-called Atman, or a soul, and that it sort of is said to dissolve into the Mahat, the great self, the oversoul. But this is not described that way in Buddhist teachings. So Neoplatonism is very interesting and might have even had some Buddhist influences. I'm quite interested in the early, even pre-Socratic Greek philosophers like Heraclitus and Pythagoras and Parmenides and so forth, and because they were dealing with some similar issues that the Buddha was working out. And then these things evolve. So Neo-Platonist, it means that they are holding modified and refined views that are based in Plato. And they become quite Buddhist in some ways. And I can't help but think there's probably some, perhaps some Buddhist ideas floating around. Neoplatonism is an interesting school. Part of the reason why it's just being rediscovered now is that blame it on Christianity. Christianity smothered Greek philosophy, and also the Neoplatonists. Christianity just took over the Roman Empire and lorded it over them. Lorded over them, and so they. But now, as Christianity unravels in the West, it's pretty significant. You can see that there's a need for recovering some sense of meaning in life, some strategy for dealing with life. And so they're going back and recovering the teachings of these philosophers who were, they're actually after the time of Christ, they're into the Christian era, and they were around in the Roman Empire as well, and they were quite much closer to, say, Buddhism than Christianity was, in terms of the advocacy of personal effort and insight and wisdom. So it's quite an interesting school. Yeah. Well, let us go on.
Next question from the live stream is from Garrett in Michigan, United States. Ajahn, one day a week I observe the 8 precepts. Could you please provide guidance on the 8th precept concerning luxurious sleeping places?
Well, if you're doing the 8 precepts at home, then it doesn't matter very much, but it's really designed for spending the night at a temple, where in the time of the Buddha, there weren't any bedrooms to go into. You just sat through the night. And he wanted to cut off the possibility of lay people, bringing luxurious beds to the monastery to sleep, So that is, so for a day and a night, perhaps, if you take the 8 precepts, you kind of conform to the monastic lifestyle. You don't eat in the afternoon. You can imagine people having a barbecue. Well, the monks don't eat at all afternoon, so maybe the lay people having a nice cookout in the monastery at 6 p.m., making everybody hungry. So it's just improper. So that you have to follow the same eating rules as the monks. There's no sexual activity. There's no entertainment or music. So, music would be disturbing to the monastery atmosphere, and not to wear perfumes and adornments, jewelry and makeup and fancy things. Just put all that display aside while you're in the monastery. If you're just keeping the 8 precepts at home, where you sleep is not all that big a deal. It's kind of to do with Indian standards of what is a bed, and the height of a bed and height of chair legs and so forth. It's a ground-sitting culture, especially for the monastics. They are not to use these kind of elaborate chairs and beds, but it's lots to do with Indian culture at the time. So I wouldn't fuss too much about it if you're doing the 8 precepts at home. And if you're doing it in a monastery, then it'll be all predetermined. If it's a monastery where you can stay over, the beds will be sort of suitable. We have beds here. We have, I think there's a total accommodation for about 21 or 22 people at Birken in separate rooms. And so we have to find something that's, and lay people come and stay. Sometimes they stay for long periods of time. So I started off with very thin mattresses, and a lot of the lay people couldn't bear it. So then we increased the thickness of the mattress. Because I don't, staying, like we have 10-day retreats, 2-week retreats. People stay sometimes weeks or longer. And they're not really ready to be monks. They might be elderly and not in good health and so forth. And so I don't impose too much ascetic practice on them. At the time of the Buddha, they didn't have monasteries where you stayed in the monastery. They didn't have accommodation for lay people. So this is a modern idea, that where you go to a retreat center or a monastery and you stay there for 10 days or a week, 2 weeks or something. That's a fairly modern idea that you don't see any of that in the time of the Buddha. You don't see him teaching 10-day retreats or for lay people or any of the monks doing that. There would be conversations with lay people in the village. There would be Dhamma talks at the monastery, and perhaps the people would go to the hall, the monastery hall, and even sit through the night until dawn, listening to Dhamma talks and meditating. But that would be about it. So yeah, don't fuss too much with it. The main thing is to just reduce your distractions and stimulations in the house if you're doing the 8 precepts. Kind of a barren experience where you're thrust back upon your own mind, meditation. Okay.
Next question is from Upasaka Viveka from Pirkanmaa, Finland. Maybe 10 plus minutes after meditation, not very intent, I suddenly felt that everything is getting free, nothing to hold on to, everything starts to open. My body is very light, everything is still. I rarely get into the first jhana feeling joy and pleasure. This was different. It was amazing. Was that a nimitta? What is the purpose of it? I can't read your article. My English is so imperfect, but I'm so grateful that I found your channel 2 years ago.
Well, if you're experiencing lightness and joy, that's great. That's wonderful. And even if it so-called comes 10 minutes after your meditation, it's fine. The paper you're referring to is called The Mystery of the Breath, Nimitta. And it's not really about that. It's not really describing that condition of joy and lightness that you're having. It's really about a questioning about the nature of this so-called nimitta. Nimitta is a Pali word, which is usually translated as sign, and it's a specific kind of moment in meditation where the mind clarifies and becomes much more lucid, and is the sign that you're entering into a supernormal state of concentration. And the sign, usual sign given for samadhi practice, breath meditation, serenity practice, is that the kind of a light appears. But and I wrote this paper more than 25 years ago, just pointing out that there's 2 commentaries. One is an earlier one called the Vimuttimagga, meaning the path of liberation, probably the 2nd century AD in Sri Lanka, and then the Visuddhimagga in the 5th century AD, again in Sri Lanka, the path of purification. And they both, it seems quite obvious to me that the Visuddhimagga, the later one, which is very famous in the Theravada circles. It's held in high esteem and kind of sets the standard for Theravada attitudes. But it's very, seems to me, very clearly just modeled on the older commentary, the Vimuttimagga, which wasn't around very much. And now there is a good modern translation out of them. But what I noticed is that they both dealt with breath meditation and what happens in breath meditation. And they both deal with what's called this nimitta, this sign, but they describe it differently. So that was interesting, because the Visuddhimagga has taken on the most authority, and it has a kind of a rather confused description of light or something like that occurring in breath meditation. And the earlier Vimuttimagga more or less focuses on an airy quality which pervades the body rather than lights. It's not surprisingly the sign of clarity when meditating on the breath is a kind of a light and airy quality pervading your head and then spreading to your whole body. So that essay points out these differences in describing the sign. But it's not really concerned so much with your experience of joy and so forth. That experience of joy is very clearly one of the emotional characteristics of the first jhana. And those are the important parts. The Buddha is, again and again, when he describes what happens in the first stage of supernormal concentration, is that the emotion is joy and the experience of the body is pleasurable. And he doesn't repeat anything to do with the signs, but frequently, again and again, repeats these emotional and physical characteristics of joy and ease of body. So those are very important. Those are called the jhana factors, the factors of the jhana. So I'll leave that for now. Let's go on to the next question.
Next question is from the live stream from Upasika David in the Sonora Desert. Does the Arahant have a steady flow of thoughts, just like everyone else?
No, the Arahant does not have a steady flow of thoughts. It's hard to imagine, but so even the Anagami, the third stage of enlightenment, what's one of the differences between the third stage of enlightenment and the fourth stage? The Anagami has a fetter called restlessness, which is not what ordinary people experience as restlessness, but it means that the mind has a tendency to move slightly, like a little breeze, fluttering the drapes on an open window, just a little, moving the drapes just slightly. It moves by itself without sort of involuntarily. Now, it doesn't go in any corrupt places. For the ordinary person, you can have hurricanes of involuntary thoughts, rivers and floods, and the involuntary thoughts go into very dark places and so forth. This is all cleared up by the time of the third stage of enlightenment. That has ceased, but it still wafts slightly. And then that fetter is broken in the Arahant stage, and there is no further tendency for movement. And so the simile in the Dhammapada is as still as the stone by the door. So, sometimes you prop a door open by putting a stone beside it. So the mind is said to be as still as the stone by the door. Stones don't move around. Maybe drapes move around and feathers move around, but stones don't move at all. So the Arahant thinks only what they wish to think and does not think what they do not wish to think, and it doesn't have involuntary motion of thought. Yeah. Okay, next question.
Next question from the live stream is from Emperor Palpatine. The Abhidhamma breaks down everything into dhammas that are defined by their nature, svabhhava. However, Nagarjuna says that this contrasts the idea of emptiness and is sneaking in a self to these phenomena, and that phenomena do not really have an intrinsic nature. Which idea do you think matches more with the suttas?
Yeah, not Abhidhamma. I don't. There's a kind of a pseudo tension in the difference between sort of Theravada Abhidhamma and some of the Mahayana Abhidhamma ideas. So a little critique of this. The svabhhava. Svabhhava means bhava means existence, and sort of sva means like core existence. I don't think anywhere in the Theravada view of things do we think anything is permanent. And so this idea, Nagarjuna is a much later Mahayana philosopher, very famous for his application of logic to the question of does anything have essence? By the way, this whole conversation about, essence and so forth, this was had in Greece as well, and amongst the Greek philosophers. You have Heraclitus, who is describing everything as flow and like fire, just without substantial essence. And then others who are like Parmenides, who are atomic philosophers. This conversation is like, it occurs to people, is there something solid at the base of reality or not? Is there something that persists? Is there an identity? So this is the question of identity. And Aristotle, for instance, talks about identity. This is the kind of the basis of Western logic. A is A. He has this idea that there is this thing, and it can't be any other thing. A is A. It's not B. So this is not all that sophisticated a logical process. And by the way, I have my suspicions that some Greek ideas and logical processes crept into the analytical schools of Buddhism probably after, as late as the 3rd century BC up to the 1st century AD, 2nd century AD. The Greeks and Greek influence were in northern India and influenced certain branches of Buddhism. I would say that it's very, it's very clear that the Buddha and the original suttas and everything is very clear. There is essentially no thing. There is no thingness to anything, and that doesn't require Abhidhamma. There are no continuous identities, unchanging identities that are at least even worth talking about. But this is a debate. I call it immature, or it's almost political. It's like, who's going to be the smartest? Like, who's going to get the upper hand? How do we critique the other school? So this kind of debate, this Abhidhamma debates, are quite often trivial, or they're attempting to a degeneration, actually. And you see this in all religions. Religions start as soon as it doesn't take 10 years before somebody within it goes on their own way and wants to advocate their school. You see this in Christianity, particularly. I think there's 30,000 sects of Christianity. In Islam, you see this Sunni, whatever it is, the Sunni Shia split, and then there are even other little subsects of it as well, the Druze and so forth. Hinduism is full of diverse ideas, and so the Buddhist schools develop. But I think that's a false play. It's not really a significant difference there. Theravada doesn't hold any, essentially doesn't hold that svabhhava is some sort of atomic unit that persists in time. It doesn't hold water. Okay, next question.
Next question is from Tik in Singapore. Dear Bhante, I listened to your discussion of Greek monks so far. I do appreciate your dedication on this topic. When I researched the comparison between Pyrrhonism and Buddhism, some people equate Pyrrho's, quote, no views and, quote, non-attachment in Buddhism. This thought makes me really itchy. Do you agree with this idea? Does the non-attachment really mean having no views at all?
Well, we certainly are bringing the Greeks in today, aren't we? Well, this philosopher Pyrrho, Pyrrhho, I think it is a very interesting Greek philosopher. And often I think he's thought to be kind of a sophist or a skeptic. And it turns out that Pyrrho, it seems, in history had gone to India, perhaps with Alexander. So I'm just filling in the general audience here is probably not spending their nights studying Greek philosophy and early Greek philosophy. So this person who is asking the question is interested in this, and it is a very fascinating area. So this philosopher Pyrrho apparently interviewed it couldn't have been very deep way. He was only in India perhaps for less than a year. And he interrogated he encountered Indian philosophers. They were called gymnosophists, sort of like a gymnast of the mind, or a gymnast of the spiritual dimension. The Indian philosophers, the ascetics. I'm not sure that he actually encountered Buddhist monks. It's not clear enough. The encounters that the Greek monks, Greek philosophers, were brought along by Alexander for the purpose of talking to the Indian philosophers along the way. Let me just say that Alexander's teacher, his personal sort of tutor, was Aristotle, and Alexander was quite impressed by philosophers. And he also was very interested in books and gathering books and writing things down. And so he ended up going all the way the 4,000 miles from Greece to India and invading northern India and having encounters there. And Pyrrho was one of the people who were trying to get some idea what the Indians thought. And then he came back and he has this attitude. I would say he's more like just a skeptic than a Buddhist. Having no attachment to views, holding no view is true, is not actually Buddhism. It's usually that was called eel wiggler, where they just argue on any side of any question. This is also arises. Plato doesn't approve of this. This is kind of sophistry. Where the person is convinced that nobody knows anything and you can argue on any side of anything. And this Pyrrho is a skeptic, he's not accepting anything at face value at all. So whether that is Buddhism or not is very dubious. I would say people have overblown that connection. There is a whole book called Greek Buddha by, I can't remember his first name, but his last name is Beckwith. And he says that Pyrrho encountered Buddhists at the time and that their attitudes at the time, and that indicates that early Buddhism was more or less pure skepticism. which Pyrrho picked up, and that the type of Buddhism we see now is obviously a later development and has overcome their early pure skeptic sort of sophistry, and that Pyrrho had the early version of it. I don't think that happened. I don't accept that. Pyrrho and many of the Greek thinkers are very interesting, and they overlap in certain ways with certain ideas in Buddhism as well. But you have to be careful about being too certain about any of this. Yeah. Okay, let's go on.
Next question is from the live stream from Peaceful Mind. While meditating, I realized that my mind, which I didn't know before, lived in deep depression for a very long time. So I was trying to do metta meditation, but it doesn't seem to work well. How should I develop it?
Well, if you read the sutta called The 11 Benefits of Loving Kindness, and by the way, so listen to my talks in the YouTube channel on loving kindness, and I gave a talk, a series of talks, I think 10 talks on metta, loving kindness, and the last 2 talks are on that sutta called The 11 Benefits of Loving Kindness. But what the noticeable thing about that is that the preliminary paragraph before you get to the benefits are just about how much intensity of practice this requires, that this should be practiced often, deeply, regularly, constant, with due effect, so that it can yield the benefits. And one of the benefits are obviously clear, that it overcomes depression, that one sleeps well, one wakes well, one does not have bad dreams, one becomes affectionate to human beings, one becomes affectionate to non-human beings. On and on it goes. Your face becomes serene. Your mind is easily calmed. So many benefits to this. So yes, if you do this, but you got to understand, you must immerse yourself in it. This isn't just a 15 minutes on the way to work. This is an immersion, and it's a worthwhile immersion. People spend enormous, they collect stamps, they fill their house with antiques, they go to Africa and run marathons, or they do all kinds of incredible devotions to activities. But this is really one of the sublime things that you can devote yourself to, and has much greater benefits than any of those other activities. Yeah. Okay, next question.
Next question from the live stream is from JY in Korea. Dear Ajahn, I feel like I've suffered from sensory desire and greed, but on the other hand, it's hard to get out of this, like drugs. How should I practice?
Yeah, let me give a little teaching from the Buddha about these 3 things: greed, hatred, and delusion. The Buddha says, anger, the aversive temperament, is a great stain on the personality, but is easier to get rid of. Greed is a lesser stain on the personality and very difficult to get rid of. Delusion is a great stain on the personality and very difficult to get rid of. So anger is really a great stain, a great problem, but it's not that hard to get rid of, because it is intrinsically unpleasant. So you can't be angry and having a good time at the same time. Anger is intrinsically, the Buddha describes it as a simile, as a sickness. Greed, however, can be accompanied sometimes by pleasant sensation. And greed, it's not so you eat the last piece of pie, you eat some extra food, or you spend too much time watching TV, or, wallowing in sensual enjoyments, that's not so, it's like nobody's particularly damaged by it, although it's trivial. It's not a very high thing. But it's really hard to get past it. I mean, the ice cream is just calling you from the fridge, you know. When you're a little bit lonely or restless, and then you flick the TV on, or you get the ice cream, or you do both. You flick the TV on, and then you eat more ice cream than you should, and then, you know, so it's hard to get rid of because it's pleasure. It's accompanied by pleasure. But it's a brief pleasure, and this is probably, you realize it's kind of empty. It doesn't give you lasting well-being. So this is its problem. So until you find a substitute for that where you start to feel okay, just in ordinary circumstances, then you can possibly free yourself from like the sensory desires. But you need something to replace it with. Otherwise, it's just like you're sitting in, it's like being trapped in an elevator. You just can't wait to get out of there. But if you meditate more, then being without too much stimulation is a pleasant, okay experience. So you don't need to be stuffing your face all the time or distracting yourself all the time. So this is only arises through meditation. Yeah. So meditation is the answer. More meditation, more, especially serenity meditation, breath meditation, other things like that, to make yourself more content and at ease without requiring the distraction of the sensory experience. Yeah.
Next question from the live stream is from BL. How should one approach apathy? I find myself regularly questioning my motivations while trying to meditate and feel apathy strongly, and am unsure how to deal with it.
Well, here we go back to Greece again. The apathy was a very desirable condition by the Greek philosophers. They wanted to become apathetic, but it had a good connotation in those days. The root of it is pathos, and you can either be pathetic or apathetic, not pathetic. And pathetic is not just a loser. Pathetic is that lost in the emotions. Apathy is to be able to, more or less what we would call equanimity. We have a word in Pali, in the Buddhist vocabulary, that exalts this experience, and it's called upekkha, which would be, you know, if we really wanted to go back to the original meaning of apathy, is like upekkha and apathy are the same. You're not swayed by these strong emotions. You're not swept away. You're in a balanced, serene, very healthy state, sterling quality of equanimity. So the apathy that you're talking about is actually a form of sloth, of fatigue, of heaviness. And that's a hindrance, that's a problem. Indifference, lack of motivation. So that is, you need to motivate yourself. And there are ways to motivate yourself. You think, well, life is short, you know, and I don't know when it's going to end. It could be tomorrow. What do I want to do? Is it possible to increase my level of happiness and clarity of mind and inner well-being? Then I better get on with it. I need some motivation here. I need to strive. I need to find out and increase the quality of my inner well-being. So that would motivate you and dispense with your apathy, what you're calling your apathy. Yeah, so.
Next question is from John in Twickenham, Middlesex, UK. The third frequent recollection to strive to abandon former habits. Is this both unwholesome and wholesome habits? Is this because it is prudent not to cling to anything?
What John is referring to are the 10 subjects for frequent recollection by one who has gone forth. So specifically, this is for monks and nuns. And there are 10 reflections that you should recite, sort of reflect on every day. have I abandoned my former habits? Now, these former habits are those which were habits of the lay life. They would be worldly habits. Those are the ones that you are seeking to abandon. My former habits from my lay life, which would not be appropriate in the life of one who has gone forth. And so that's specifically what it means. It does not mean that you're going to abandon all habits. The Buddha is asking you to actually train yourself so that the new good stuff becomes second nature to you. And this is called right effort. And there are 4 kinds of right efforts. The ones that are involved in abandoning unwholesome intentional activities, and the ones that are for creating and developing and habitualizing, in a sense, the positive, the wholesome qualities, so that they are just intrinsic and automatic. This is the training of people in sports and in music. You just keep practicing until it's second nature. It doesn't feel that there's any effort required. There's a lot of effort required to get to the stage of effortlessness, though. Yeah.
Next question from the live stream is from John S. It seems that ill will, anger, and hatred are lumped together in the second hindrance, yet ill will and harmfulness are separated in right intention. Is this correct?
Yes. Ill will, and the second one is the desire for injury. This is in right intention. So in right intention is the intention of non-ill will, non-cruelty, and renunciation, the abandonment of greed, actually. So the right intention deals with 2 of the major 3 things. There's greed, hatred, and delusion. So right intention is the abandonment of both ill will and particularly the desire for harm to another. Himsa. You know, this generally in Indian society, there's this celebration of ahimsa. Ahimsa means non-harm. So the non-killing of conscious creatures, the non-harming of others. Harmlessness is exalted. So the opposite of that is harmfulness. So the intention of ill will. So you can be quite angry at somebody. They might be, maybe it's your wife or your child or something. You can be quite angry at them, but you don't wish them harm. The next level of that should be rooted out, but also some people actually wish the person harm as well. So that has to be absolutely rooted out. The third factor in that is this nekama, or renunciation, which is the rooting out of greed, the absence of greed. Yeah.
Next question.
Yeah, I think this next question will be the last question.
Very good. Our final question today is from the live stream from Angel. Dear Ajahn, I realized recently that when my thoughts go towards a negative direction, my mind recoils and shuts the thoughts down. Is this what the Buddha meant by, quote, 2 types of thoughts? Or am I just, quote, suppressing my thoughts?
Yeah, a little explanation. The Buddha talks about before he was the Buddha, before he was enlightened, he developed strategies for dealing with his mind, and he made 2 heaps: wholesome thoughts that weren't regretted, and unwholesome thoughts that could be regretted, weren't conducive to well-being. And he then committed himself not to thinking those unwholesome thoughts, and only that heap of unwholesome thoughts, and then he would only select thoughts from the wholesome pile and use that. So that is he did that very deliberately. And in terms of suppression, yes, he's very big on removing, preventing, and squashing unwholesome thoughts. We've got something seeped in from Freudian theory, most of Freud is completely discredited these days. Freud is a relic of the past. He's off on all kinds of really unscientific ideas, etc., of the mind, and all about repression and suppression and this and that. This probably did harm to people's mental health in the West. The Buddhism is very much for preventing and removing certain types of thoughts, and it's a very active and continuous process. This is a very great confusion. Sometimes you'll hear a lot of talk about mindfulness and just watching. Don't interfere with the thoughts. Just watch them, and they all sort of fix themselves or go away. This has nothing to do with the way the Buddha described mindfulness. Mindfulness is the tool by which you exert right effort, which is to prevent and remove unwholesome thoughts and to create and develop wholesome thoughts. And you use your mindfulness for that purpose. And this is prevention, removal, stopping, changing. This is an active process which is fully approves of interfering with thoughts, removing thoughts, and doesn't think there's going to be any harm at all from that. This is something I've gone into in great depth, and I am there's a book I have written, which will come out maybe, I don't know, this year, on right effort. So all about right effort. So stay tuned. Some of the people in this room are the long-suffering editors of this book. Yes. So stay tuned for that. So I want to also conclude by reminding you that for the next 3 weeks, there won't be a Q&A, but there will be a brand new talk coming up. 3, in fact, 3 talks coming up. And they will be on Sundays, and you'll be able to access those. And then by the 4th Sunday, hopefully we'll be back for a live stream Q&A again. Yes. Okay.